Welcome to the Circular Economy Show, and welcome to part 3 of our trilogy connecting the dots between the circular economy and the climate crisis. Ultimately, we're talking about here an economic transformation that drives better growth for business, people, and the environment. Last week, we explored the world of construction and the built environment. This week, we're taking a deep dive into mobility. Later on, we'll be hearing from a car manufacturer about their strategy on circular economy and what the circular economy has to say about the electric mobility transformation. But first, leadership is absolutely crucial in this story. Setting targets, going on record, tracking against those targets. And to that end, the Foundation's CEO, Andrew Morley, recently caught up with Solvay CEO, Ilham Kadri, to talk about her personal journey on the topic, to talk about how Solvay is approaching the circular economy, and what some of their biggest barriers and challenges are.
For this conversation, I thought initially if we could just take a few moments to talk about your personal journey and what's driven you to take the role at Solvay and also to partner with the foundation.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew, and thank you for having me. Sustainability is very, very close to my heart. It started, in fact, at home. When I was a child, I grew up in the beautiful city of Casablanca in Morocco. And I grew up with the grandmother who taught me about the preciousness of resources. In fact, the scarcest resource at home was potable water, believe it or not. So in simple words, we didn't have the luxury to waste. And Andrew, this conviction has stayed with me throughout my life. I am greedy with natural resources, including in my personal and professional life. One example I'm very proud of is the first reverse osmosis plant in the history of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, not using fossil fuels and for water treatment applications. And indeed, in my past 5 years leading industrial and chemical companies as a CEO, I feel very fortunate to be able to carry out actions that go beyond my childhood dreams. Yeah.
So tell me a bit about Solvay. And I know Solvay is an institution really in the world of chemistry and has a tremendous history. Maybe you could just tell us a bit about Solvay from your words and why you wanted to work with Solvay.
Well, Andrew, we are a science company. Our solutions are mostly invisible, but they are everywhere around you. For example, we lighten any objects, be it your car, your e-bike, or the airplane you take to your favorite vacation destination. We do so by replacing metal, therefore making object lighter, more energy efficient, consuming less fuel, and therefore emitting less CO2. We're also inside, for example, the lithium-ion batteries for EVs and hybrids from conception to end of life. And even more, we are giving batteries a new life with our partners Veolia and Renault, and thanks to the MacArthur Foundation. So we are synonymous with circularity and clean mobility. We are also inside your smartphones and devices that keep you connected. In healthcare applications, our solutions are, for example, improving the lives of hemodialysis patients every day. Finally, you may be using our Bio Guar shampoo every day. And on a sweet note, you can taste us in our natural circular vanillin that gives flavor to your chocolates, sweets, and birthday cakes.
So that's quite a range of activities, chemistry and materials. But perhaps you could just talk a little bit about the role of chemistry in the circular economy and Solvay's potential to be a leader in that space.
Yeah, Andrew, chemistry is the mother of all industries. That's how I name it. And it's a key enabler of the circular economy. I tend to believe that in the chemical industry and in our labs at Solvay, we shall become the designers of circularity, yeah? Like in the textile industry. For instance, our chemistry allows us to take rice husk, which is normally thrown away, and extract a component called the ferulic acid to produce natural vanillin. And think about it, Andrew, if you reuse a waste, it's not a waste anymore. Now, one of the most exciting examples, which started with the MacArthur Foundation, is the electric battery, Solvay is one of the only companies out there that has the technologies needed to create and recycle the battery at the end of its life. And we have a fantastic partnership with Veolia and Renault to enable the production of circular electric vehicle batteries. Through this partnership, we are regenerating metals such as lithium, cobalt, nickel, and the foundation played a key role and has endorsed this partnership, which is really wonderful. And what we are doing here is especially critical since, as you know, Andrew, electrical vehicles are expected to grow to almost 120 million vehicles worldwide by 2030. Several car manufacturers, our customers, have now made commitment to sell only electrical vehicles within the next decade and Europe wants all its cars to be electric or hybrid by 2035. So this is just the beginning. As part of our Solvay One Planet roadmap, we've pledged as a company to more than double our circular revenues using recycled products or renewable by 2030.
That's quite a significant ambition for Solvay in this space. Can you just elaborate that on a bit in terms of how you are leading this ambition in Solvay, and what are some of the challenges as a leader in getting buy-in and aligning the organization around this vision and ambition?
Yeah, I mean, the ambition is big. We need all key stakeholders to work together. It's all connected. And achieving a circular economy is absolutely essential if you want to address the magnitudes of change, the scarcity of resources. So we need partnership. We need, stakeholders like you and as part of the chemical industry, Andrew, we are part of the problem, but also part of the solution. And we acknowledge that what took us here will not bring us there. Challenges are multiple: emissions, waste, sustainability, and profitability at the same time. We need to keep one eye on the microscope when we are a publicly listed company and one eye on the telescope to reinvent ourselves. So the biggest challenges are both these cultural shifts, which is required because it's very disruptive approaches, and also the scale up of the solutions to build the viable, profitable businesses and not to stop at anecdotes, as I call them. And at Solvay, we have developed a series of promising opportunities, Andrew. We are busy now embedding the circular mindset in our businesses, right? And our strategy. We also want to enable more transformational systemic collaboration with partners like the one with Renault and Veolia. We simply need more of these. And more practically, we want to enable the circular economy ambition also with good data management system, which we don't have today, from procurement to sales and even after sales, including, by the way, Scope 3. And we're not yet there where we want to be with data and reporting, but we are working with other partners towards building something, robust, including from the non-financial disclosure and reporting point of view. So yeah, this is a revolution going on, including in research and innovation arena, Andrew. Our chemists and engineers are starting to design new molecules, new polymers and solutions, which can have a third life from day one, right? And this is new. It's new, it's challenging, but exciting. And I truly believe, Andrew, that with digital, with AI, with quantum computing, there is a new fascinating era which is opening up to a new, modern, circular, and regenerative chemistry at the service of new form of human progress. And all of this is actually challenges, but there are great opportunities as well.
Fantastic. And I think that the way that you describe it illustrates a level of sophistication in Solvay that not everybody has with respect to the circular economy. Many people really think of it as a waste and recycling agenda, but you're describing it much more in terms of a fundamental shift in the design of your product service systems and the way you think about the organization, its skills, its capacity to innovate in this way. Are you seeing other CEOs in our network that you're working with approach this in a similar way with a similar level of ambition? How big a movement do you think this is?
I think it's a journey, Andrew. We should demonstrate that we can be circular and profitable. And I think all CEOs, all management teams and board of directors, they know that this is, there is a sense of urgency, right? Nobody can, walk away from this. It's part of our strategies, discussions. The EU is leading the way with courage and boldness through the Green Deal. Foundations like the MacArthur Foundation is helping us, to also build ecosystems, like the Veolia, Renault and Solvay, definitely. And we need more of this, right? We need to find business cases where we can show that it can happen. We can invest together. We can go faster together. We can de-risk project together. And then we need stakeholders like investors, right? Portfolio managers who also give us, the resources and the time and support, industries like the chemical industry, which is hard to abate, right? Which is more labeled as, a polluter and emitter of CO2 and an industry with waste rather than, an industry which can be part of the solution. So that shift from linear thinking, produce, consume, and waste to building new models by developing circular solutions, it's a journey. And we need to have that agile, cross-functional team that will reinvent the businesses. Requires collaboration along the value chain that are more involved than just the one-to-one, traditional, probably transactional only relationship we are used to having with our suppliers and customers. And we have to ensure we turn the circular business model into also a competitive one. And that's why, Andrew, we need authorities to build infrastructure, to put money in value chains, which are becoming more circular, favoring circularity to landfill. So that's important. You also need time. If you look back, Andrew, our first idea of circular EV batteries was discussed 10 years ago, with Renault 4 years ago, with Veolia 3 years ago. Now we are prototyping, and we will need to quickly scale up our partnership across every geography and every value chain where Solvay is a leader to make it sticky and make it big and impactful.
How important is enabling policy and regulations and incentives in this transition? And what are the key issues for you in that space?
Well, the regulatory framework is extremely important, Andrew. We need the authorities to put, a framework. We private or publicly traded companies, we're not regulators, right? We can show what the technology can do. We can innovate. We can collaborate to de-risk our projects and take them to a bigger scale. But we need infrastructure, like for EV, right? If you don't have charging station and enough of them, there will be less adoption of EV, right? We need, as I said, more incentive to go towards circularity than to put in a waste in a landfill, right? So taxation has to follow, right? So I think I'm very optimistic because I've seen the EU moving on with the 2050 pledge and Green Deal and the Fit for 55. The US and the Biden administration is also following and rejoining the Paris Agreement, and China has committed to 2060, carbon neutrality. So all of this is good news, right, for the citizen of the world I am, but also for the leader of a global company. And we need more now to co-design the how, right? And rather than forecast, backcast and look, if we want this by 2030, 2050, what does it mean for us today? And how we're going to build and co-create those ecosystems which are becoming more circular, including, by the way, small and medium-sized enterprises, entrepreneurs, right? Which can bring disruptive ideas into the ecosystem. And again, circularity needs to go along with profitability.
Ilham, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the circular economy and the vision that Solvay has and the ambition that you're driving as an organisation.
You might have heard in that Ilham interview the kind of tussle that a CEO has between measuring quarter-by-quarter success in the current economy whilst trying to create a transformation to a completely different economy. And you also would have heard her talk about Solvay's EV battery project in collaboration with Renault and Veolia. It might seem that the transformation to electric mobility is a fairly simple climate story. Well, not so. I've been finding out quite a bit more about the world of EV batteries. A familiar sight to most. Tailpipe emissions pollute our cities and are major contributors to climate change. That is why the electric mobility revolution is such a breath of fresh air, quite literally. Electric cars will solve the problem of pollution and part of the climate impacts of cars. However, in order for electric vehicles to run on electricity, they need to store power somewhere when they're charged. And just like with many other electric products, that power is stored in a battery, or rather in many small batteries which together form battery packs. EV battery packs contain a number of critical metals like lithium, nickel, cobalt and aluminium. Most such batteries lose their capacity to store energy after a decade or so. To date, the efforts to give a new life to EV batteries and the components in them haven't kept up with the development of the EV market. That means that at the end of their useful life, EV batteries need to be discarded. As EVs become the default mode of road transport, we'll need more and more such batteries. By the end of the 2020s, the number of EVs on our roads is expected to increase from 3 million in 2020 to over 145 million. That's tens of millions of tons of waste. And waste is just a small part of the problem of EV batteries. There's also the environmental destruction caused by mining the metals that go into them, and the emissions related to the extraction and processing of those materials. In some pockets of the automotive industry, companies are beginning to realise that the circular economy needs to underpin the transition to electric transport, and to look for solutions to keep the materials that go into EVs and their batteries in use. One such pioneering effort is the collaboration started in 2021, where car manufacturer Renault and environmental services firm Veolia joined forces with chemicals multinational Solvay with the mission to give EV batteries a second life. The partners' plan is to extend the life of EV batteries by at least 5 years and possibly by as much as a decade. How? By using EV batteries at the end of their useful life in vehicles to store electricity for the grid. Since batteries are jacks of all trades, they can store energy for just about anything that runs on electricity. As we shift to sources of energy that are intermittent, like solar and wind, we'll need a lot of energy storage capacity to back up our grids. In this manner, the life of an EV battery could be extended to as much as 2 decades, at the end of which the Renault-Veolia-Solvay partnership intends to find ways to keep the materials in EV batteries in the loop by using them to make new batteries. Of course, that's just one story, one example of completing the picture in the mobility sector in terms of using the circular economy to tackle greenhouse gas emissions. There are many more. Have a listen to this clip where the lead author on the Foundation's paper, Completing the Picture, Sukanya Ghee, talks about the emissions beyond the exhaust pipe.
If I say to you, car emissions, what do you think of?
I think of the smoke coming out of the exhaust,
Exactly.
the fumes.
Yes, so exhaust fume, that's what everybody thinks of when you think of emissions in cars. So the solution naturally is electrification, and that's a big part of the solution. But what about the car itself? What about all the emissions that went into making the materials for that car? So that's the overlooked emissions, and that's what we're trying to focus. If we do not tackle those emissions, we will have it will be very difficult to meet our climate targets. So going back to the car example, just to illustrate, there's of course a story around the 55%, which is electrification, absolutely critical, to address the 45% through these 3 principles. For example, designing out waste. It's about designing cars that are lighter, or it's about thinking about materials that are very durable. It's about making sure that you create less waste through your supply chain. By keeping materials in use, it's about thinking of how can we design cars that can be reused, so remanufactured, refurbished, repaired, so they can be used for longer. And then thinking about how can we increase the utilization of that car? So having business models such as car sharing or leasing or renting, subscription models, these help increase the lifetime, the longevity of that car. And multimodal mobility systems is a great example of that. When you apply these two principles of designing out waste and keeping materials in use, what you're intrinsically doing is reducing your demand for new virgin materials, reducing those emissions, and you're avoiding incineration and landfill, and so avoiding the other side of the emissions. If you apply these types of principles for, let's say, passenger cars globally, we find that if you model that, you can reduce emissions by 70% in 2050. And that's from the material production side of the story. Right. So that helps really illustrate that.
Hi. This episode of the Circular Economy Show is part of our network workshop, an event that takes place twice a year and that's designed for and with the Foundation's network. These workshops provide a forum for circular economy insights and inspiration and enable network organizations to connect, learn, and collaborate with other circular economy professionals around the world. It's currently taking place online, so if your organization is part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's network, you can register now at community.emf.org. Thank you, and back to the studio.
So if your business has been selling as many combustion cars as possible, what do you do on the circular economy? Earlier this year, my colleague Laura Franco caught up with James Lundstrom from Volvo to find out how they're approaching the circular economy in the short term and how they're approaching the circular economy in the long term.
Could you please tell us a bit more about Volvo Cars' goals when it comes to climate change and circular economy?
Yes, so in essence, we have been working now for a number of years with both a long-term setup and a short-term setup. So the long-term setup is that we have said that we will be carbon neutral by 2040. And that in order to realize that also means that we need to be a circular business or a circular company by 2040, because as was mentioned here earlier, even for an energy intense product like a vehicle during its use phase, still roughly 40 to 45% of the total carbon impact comes from design and operations around the vehicle, both in production, service, and end of life. Now, to reach that target, we've then broken it down and started with a sort of a set of circular targets and carbon impact targets towards 2025 as well.
So let's talk a bit more about that, because of course 2040, it's 20 years from today. And you've mentioned that you have targets near today. What actions are you going to take that will ensure that you get there? And how do you connect circular economy and climate change at Volvo Cars?
So the list of actions would take a little longer than we have now, but what we have done is doing a complete mapping of our carbon impact during use phase, during production phase, during our own operations, manufacturing and service. And we've created an internal map where we can see what every step of the detail has impact in terms of the materials we use, the logistics linked to them, where the suppliers are located. And based on carbon impact and financial savings, because in the end, we have to achieve all of this in being carbon neutral, but we also have to be a profitable business. We've identified a number of key areas. So right now, towards 2025, key focus is on recycling and renewable materials. It's about minimizing waste in our own operations, minimizing unnecessary transports, and renewable energy in our own operations.
And one question I have for a big company, of course, but like Volvo Cars, is how do you get the stakeholders that you work with across your value chain to get on board with these solutions and to focus on climate change and circular economy?
I think it's a little of everything here. Of course, we are the final customer in a long supply chain. A general component normally has 4 to 5 levels of suppliers involved. But also a lot of our suppliers are huge companies as well who have the same commitment to creating a more sustainable business. So there is a joint interest here. It's not just that we have to, if I say chase our suppliers, we have a tremendous amount of input of suppliers who are bringing new ideas, new material concepts, new concepts instead of selling parts, and they're looking for partners to help them achieve their own sustainability goals. So we can work a lot with the major suppliers to show that the smaller ones that may not have the same R&D and innovation capability, that this can be done and it can be done in a profitable way. And once that is visual to them, it is a lot easier to get them to follow along.
So in other words, what you're saying is that you have to show both the environmental but also the economic or financial gains of the circular economy.
In essence, yes. It's very, I mean, we are an industry that has a huge amount of capital in it, but if you look at the profitability levels at any part, having 5 to 6% profitability is average. Having 8% profitability is great in our industry. So there isn't really much wiggle room, if I use that. So what we have to show and what we have to use our R&D capabilities and designing and so on is finding the ways to doing this in a profitable way. And I would say that what we've seen so far is that we're well on track with our progress, and we are definitely able to show that we can do this in a very profitable way, and we can have our suppliers coming along on that journey.
Thank you, James. Let's talk about a bit more about what Volvo Cars is already doing in the circular economy. What could you share with us some of the examples of things?
Of course. So, I mean, one thing that many people don't actually know is that the car is the most recycled consumer product as it is already, where we have a recycling rate in Europe of, or a recovery rate, we should use the right term, a recovery rate of 95%. But the issue with the product being very complex is that the quality of the materials coming out of the recycling process is not on the same level that goes into it. So what we're doing now is working a lot with our suppliers, finding out which components are suitable, where can we do recycling on the same level, or could we potentially doing upcycling, or could we be using materials that cannot be recycled to the exact same level but has a minimum environmental impact. So what we have said towards 2025 is that we want to have 25% recycled or bio-based plastics, we want to have 25% recycled steel, and we want to have 40% recycled aluminum. And the reason for the difference between steel and aluminum is more of the aluminum is cast metal, which is easier to do with recycled qualities, whereas steel, which is much more forged and is used more in safety applications, have different properties on it today.
And James, one of the things that we've mentioned is we need to change as well how we use the products and everything around us. So I know that Volvo Cars has a sharing and a subscription based model. Could you tell us a bit more about those?
Yes. So as mentioned in the introduction, I mean, becoming a circular business means that we're looking at a future where we have to differentiate the ownership models of a vehicle. And so we already today have 3 options essentially to consumers, a little bit depending on where in the world you are, where you can buy the car, you can subscribe to a car, like you essentially subscribe to a cell phone. And when you don't want a car, you hand it back and we can take care of it and make it ready for the next customer. And we've also started with having transport as a service, which is a company we call M, which we're rolling out now since about 2 years, where you only pay as you go for the amount of time when you use the car, and otherwise it's just in the app and parked at a close by space where you want it.
And you mentioned that you have to make the economics work. What else needs to happen to help you get to your 2025 goals?
I think our 2025 goals are, we normally label them internally that we're doing circular efforts in a linear economy. So we do see that the ambition levels that we have put up, which if they all work out, will lead to a carbon impact reduction by 40% compared to 2018. And we believe that we can do that in, if I say, a traditional business model with traditional suppliers, just by becoming more efficient, becoming more aware of where we have waste in our operations, not physically, but process-wise. And then working together with suppliers and making the right choices in terms of material and getting their feedback on what potentially that has impact on how we use the components or how we service and plan for that. I think that the big step is when we're going 25 and beyond, where we have to start looking at how we actually design our products and how we think about the usage. And we are starting on that journey. We have some pretty interesting ideas, but not that has been implemented yet.
So hopefully it's clear that the circular economy has a huge role to play in cutting greenhouse gas emissions in the mobility sector. Of course it's challenging, and of course we need to start somewhere. And of course there are many topics related that we've barely touched on in this episode. What about multimodal transport in cities, for example? Thank you for watching this episode of the Circular Economy Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn to get notified every time we go live, and you can catch up on all of our episodes on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's website.